Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. You know how this works. We take fascinating real-world cases, and today we're going to be looking at a case from the OpenStax Microbiology textbook. I'll put a link down in the description. But basically, we have a young woman, Angela, and she's been rushed to the ER, struggling to breathe. Her airway is swollen shut.
Oh, wow. Super scary, right?
Absolutely terrifying. And to make matters worse, she's got no history of allergies, no asthma. And to top it all off, she mentions that her father died young under very similar circumstances, like a sudden respiratory attack. And they never figured out what caused it.
Okay, so that's a huge red flag right there. No obvious triggers, potential genetic link. Where do you even begin with something like that?
In a crisis situation like this, the ER docs have to act fast. So they're going to start with antihistamines and corticosteroids, even before they know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got to bring that swelling down right away. But
the
textbook says that the treatments, they didn't really help. I mean, they stopped things from getting worse, but what happens next? So from there, she's admitted for observation. And they start running a bunch of tests, allergy panels to see if there are any allergens involved, blood work to check for these immune system signals called cytokines, and a sputum analysis to look for anything funky going on in her lungs.
Okay, so they're casting a wide net here. I'm guessing these tests are going to uncover something important.
Well, they do, but the results are kind of unexpected. The allergy tests come back completely negative, no common allergens there. And the sputum analysis, it shows nothing unusual, no bacteria, no pathogens that could be causing this inflammation.
So we're ruling things out, but we still don't really have an answer. What about those cytokine levels in her blood? What do those show?
That's where things get a little tricky. Her inflammatory cytokines are through the roof, definitely elevated, which tells us her immune system is going haywire, reacting to something. But we just don't know what...
Okay, this is where I'd be freaking out if I was the doctor. You've got inflammation, but no obvious trigger. It's like the immune system is sounding the alarm.
Yeah.
But we don't know what set it off.
Exactly. And there's another piece of the puzzle that just adds to the confusion. Her white blood cell count was a bit high, which again points to an immune response, but her antibody levels were normal.
Okay, so what does that tell us? I know antibodies are part of the immune system, but remind me how they fit into all of this.
So think of antibodies like the specialized forces of your immune system. They're produced by B cells, and they're part of what's called adaptive immunity. That's the part of your immune system that learns and remembers specific threats over time. So when her antibody levels come back normal, it suggests that this isn't just your typical infection or something her adaptive immune system has seen before.
Right, so more things are ruled out, but the mystery just keeps getting deeper. What other clues did the doctors find in Angela's tests?
Well, there was one finding that stood out. Her blood work showed significantly lower than normal levels of complement protein C4.
Complement protein C4. Am I even saying that right?
You get an A for effort. But seriously, this is where things start to get interesting. The complement system. It's part of what we call the innate immune response, which is basically your body's rapid response team, ready to go from day one.
So like the first line of defense.
Yeah.
Before the adaptive system even kicks in.
Exactly. These complement proteins, they work together in a cascade, like a chain reaction. They tag and sometimes even directly destroy pathogens.
So Angela's low on this specific complement protein. Could that be the key to this whole puzzle?
It's definitely a major clue. Deficiencies in complement proteins can lead to all sorts of problems, from more frequent infections to certain autoimmune disorders.
This is making me realize just how interconnected everything is in the body. Like one seemingly small imbalance can set off this whole chain reaction.
And in Angela's case, it might just explain everything. Remember that chilling detail about her father?
Yeah.
That combined with the low C4 levels led the doctor to suspect a rare genetic condition called hereditary angioedema, or HAE for short.
Hereditary Angioedema. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's not very common.
But sounds serious.
It can be. It's a disorder that directly affects the complement system, particularly a protein called C1 inhibitor. This inhibitor, as the name suggests, keeps the complement system in check. But in people with HAE, this inhibitor is either missing or it doesn't work properly. And that can lead to the complement system going into overdrive, causing these sudden and sometimes life-threatening swelling attacks.
So not an allergic reaction, not an infection, but this overactive complement system running wild. That's fascinating, but also kind of terrifying.
Yeah, it really highlights how even a small genetic glitch can have huge consequences for our health. And, you know, there are actually different types of hereditary angioedema, each with a slightly different cause.
Wait, there's more than one type?
Yep, so the most common type. And the one Angela's doctor suspected is type 1. It's caused by a deficiency in that C1 inhibitor. Then there's type 2, where you have enough of the inhibitor, but it just doesn't function properly. And finally, the rarest form, type 3, isn't directly caused by C1 inhibitor issues, but involves other genetic factors that can activate the complement system.
Wow, so there are a few different ways this condition can manifest. What a complex system.
Earlier.
So the doctor suspects HAE. How do they confirm that diagnosis?
Well, a simple blood test isn't enough for a definitive diagnosis. Angela's doctor ordered a more specific test to measure her C1-INH levels and assess the function of her inhibitors.
So they needed to go beyond just looking at the amount of C1 inhibitor and actually see if it was working properly.
Exactly. And as you might have guessed, the results confirmed the doctor's suspicions. Angela had type 1 HAE, meaning she was deficient in those crucial C1 inhibitors.
So the mystery is solved. We went from a life-threatening mystery to a specific diagnosis. And we learned so much about the immune system along the way. It's amazing how just like a tiny imbalance in one protein can have such a huge impact on somebody's health.
It really underscores the importance of genetic testing and early diagnosis, especially when dealing with rare conditions like HAE. But most importantly, it reminds us that the human body, despite its incredible complexity, is a delicate system. Even the slightest disruption can set off a cascade of effects.
This deep dive is really living up to its name. I'm hooked. What happens next for Angela?
Well, before we jump into treatments and Angela's prognosis, let's take a step back and talk about what this case reveals about the bigger picture of immunology, because there's a lot more to unpack here. You know what's fascinating about Angela's case is how it really highlights the interconnectedness of the immune system. We often separate it into innate and adaptive immunity, but in reality, they're constantly working together.
That's a great point. I'll admit, when I first learned about the immune system, I kind of pictured these two separate branches working independently. But Angela's case shows us how that's not the case at all.
Exactly. Like in Angela's situation, it's a deficiency in the innate immune system, specifically the complement system. That's triggering this whole cascade of events, leading to these severe inflammatory reactions.
It really makes you appreciate the domino effect happening within our bodies all the time. One thing goes wrong, and it can trigger this whole chain reaction.
And what's even more remarkable is that this case shows how the innate immune system, which we often think of as being nonspecific, can actually have very specific consequences.
Now, when you say nonspecific, what do you mean exactly?
Well, the innate immune system is our first line of defense against a wide range of threats. It doesn't target specific invaders the way the adaptive immune system does with its antibodies. It's more like a general alarm system, ready to respond to anything suspicious.
So it's like a security guard who checks everyone's ID at the door, but doesn't have a specific person in mind.
That's a great analogy. But here's the thing. Even though it's not designed to recognize specific pathogens, a defect in the innate system, like Angela's C1 inhibitor deficiency, can lead to very specific and predictable symptoms.
So in Angela's case, it's not just a general immune system malfunction. This deficiency is causing a very particular set of problems.
Precisely. It's a reminder that even though we categorize the immune system into these branches, it's all connected and working together in these incredibly intricate ways. And understanding those nuances is so crucial for diagnosing and treating a wide range of diseases.
You know, it's cases like this that make me appreciate the complexity of the human body. We often take our health for granted. But Angela's situation shows how a tiny imbalance can have such a huge impact. It makes you realize just how delicate this whole system really is.
Absolutely. And it also highlights the incredible advances we've made in medicine. Just a few decades ago, a case like Angela's might have remained a mystery, but now we can pinpoint the genetic basis of her condition and develop targeted therapies to manage it.
That's incredible. It's a reminder of how far we've come in terms of understanding and treating diseases.
It truly is. And as our understanding of genetics and immunology continues to improve, we can expect even more progress in the future. We're moving towards a more personalized approach to medicine, where we can tailor treatments to an individual's unique genetic makeup. Imagine that. Treatments designed specifically for you, optimizing care and improving outcomes.
That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
A future where medicine is personalized, precise, and effective.
It's closer than you think. But let's bring it back to Angela. You mentioned treatments. What are some of the options available for someone with HAE?
Well, I'm curious about those new drug therapies you mentioned earlier. How do they work to manage those swelling attacks?
There are several approaches being used and researched right now. Some of these drugs work by blocking the activity of an enzyme called kallikrein. This enzyme plays a key role in activating the complement system. So inhibiting it can prevent those severe swelling attacks.
So it's like cutting off the problem at its source.
Exactly. By inhibiting kallikrein, these drugs can prevent the excessive production of bradykinin, which is a molecule that contributes to the swelling seen in HAE attacks. So they're essentially interrupting the chain reaction that leads to those debilitating symptoms.
That's fascinating. And what about other types of drugs being developed for HAE? Are there any other promising avenues?
There are. Another approach is to target the receptors for bradykinin. So by blocking these receptors, you can prevent bradykinin from binding to cells and triggering the swelling response. It's like putting up a roadblock to prevent those inflammatory signals from getting through.
So they're tackling the problem from multiple angles.
Exactly. And even more cutting edge are drugs in development. that aim to either boost the production of C1 inhibitor or enhance its activity. Remember, that's the inhibitor that's missing or dysfunctional in people with HAE.
So instead of just blocking the effects,
Yeah.
they're trying to fix the underlying problem. That's incredible. It sounds like the research is really advancing, offering hope for people with HAE.
It really is. And this multi-pronged approach is revolutionizing how we think about treating not just HAE, but other complement-mediated disorders as well.
That makes sense. The complement system is involved in a wide range of conditions, isn't it?
Absolutely. Autoimmune disorders, inflammatory diseases, even certain types of cancer. The complement system plays a role, so the knowledge we're gaining from HAE research has the potential to unlock new therapies for a whole host of other conditions.
Wow, that's a lot to be hopeful about.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears for a moment. We've talked a lot about the science, but I want to bring it back to Angela. How is she doing now?
Well, now that she has a diagnosis, Angela can start receiving the appropriate treatment to manage her condition. But before we delve into that, I think it's important to touch on the emotional and ethical considerations that come with genetic diagnoses like this.
You're right. This is about more than just the science. What kind of challenges might someone like Angela face?
For starters, there's the emotional impact of learning. You have a rare genetic condition. There's the fear of future attacks, the anxiety of passing the condition on to children, and the potential for lifestyle limitations. It's a lot to process. And then there are the ethical considerations, especially when it comes to family planning. Knowing you carry a gene for a potentially serious condition can weigh heavily on decisions about having children.
Yeah, that's a really tough situation to be in. What kind of resources or support are available for people grappling with these issues?
Genetic counseling can be incredibly helpful. Genetic counselors are trained professionals who can help families understand the inheritance patterns of these conditions, assess their risk, and explore different options.
So they can provide guidance and support as families navigate these complex decisions. What kind of options are available when it comes to family planning in a situation like Angela's?
One option is pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, or PGD. This technique is used in conjunction with in vitro fertilization. Essentially, embryos are screened for genetic abnormalities before being implanted in the uterus.
So it gives couples the chance to select embryos that don't carry the gene for HAE. That's incredible. It's amazing how technology is giving us more control over these things.
It really is remarkable. But of course, PGD is a complex procedure with its own set of ethical considerations. It's not a decision to be made lightly.
Definitely. It's a very personal decision, and one that should be made with careful consideration and guidance from healthcare professionals and genetic counselors.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that while PGD is an option, it's not the only path forward for families facing these challenges. There are other ways to manage risk and make informed decisions about family planning.
That's reassuring to hear. It's all about having the information and support to make the choices that are right for each individual and family.
Exactly. And as our knowledge of genetics continues to evolve, we can expect even more options and resources to become available in the future.
It's amazing to think about the possibilities. But for now, let's shift back to Angela. Knowing that she has HAE, what does that mean for her life going forward? What kind of treatments are available to help her manage the condition?
The good news is that while there's no cure for HAE, there are effective treatments to help prevent those dangerous swelling attacks and allow people with HAE to live relatively normal lives.
That's a relief to hear. What kind of treatments are we talking about?
One of the mainstays of treatment is replacing the missing or dysfunctional C1 inhibitor protein. This can be done by giving patients purified C1 INH derived from blood donors.
So they're essentially giving Angela's body the missing piece it needs to regulate that overactive complement system.
Exactly. And there are also newer drug therapies, like the ones we discussed earlier, that specifically target different parts of the pathway involved in HAE attacks. These drugs can help prevent swelling attacks or reduce their severity.
It sounds like there's been a lot of progress in managing this condition. What's the prognosis for someone like Angela?
With proper management and early treatment, the prognosis for people with HAE is excellent. They can expect to live full and active lives, though they may experience occasional swelling episodes.
That's so reassuring. It's amazing how far we've come in terms of understanding and treating these complex conditions.
It really is a testament to the power of scientific research and the dedication of medical professionals.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. From the intricacies of the immune system to the challenges and triumphs of living with a rare genetic disorder, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive.
I agree. It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you, and I hope our listeners have gained a newfound appreciation for the complexity and wonder of the human body.
And perhaps even a spark of curiosity to learn more about the incredible world of immunology.
Exactly. There's so much more to discover, and I encourage everyone to keep exploring and asking questions.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of discovery. We hope you found it informative, engaging, and thought-provoking.
And remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about our bodies and how they work, the better equipped we are to make informed decisions about our health and well-being.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a new and exciting topic. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay healthy.